Hey everyone, Mr. Harvey here. Let's continue our lecture. We're on chapter 13, ladies and gentlemen, and we are talking about the Industrial Revolution. Now, in today's lecture, ladies and gentlemen, I really want to focus on some of the major ideologies that are going to rise during the 19th century Industrial Revolution. We're going to be talking about socialism, and then we're also going to be talking about communism, aka Marxism, during the 19th century. So let's get into it. All right. So we're going to be talking about socialism and communism within this lecture, ladies and gentlemen. And obviously, these are going to be two really important ideologies for us to understand because they're going to have a tremendous impact on Europe. Most famously, right through the Russian Revolution that we're going to be seeing, where Russia becomes the communist Soviet Union. So it's going to be really important for us later on, within this class to understand, but also really important for us to understand the Industrial Revolution, ladies and gentlemen. Socialism and communism are going to be a response, okay, in effect from the Industrial Revolution. And so these are two ideologies that we really need to understand. So what I'm going to do on this slide, ladies and gentlemen, is I'm going to define both socialism and capitalism, and then I'm going to give you some examples so you can kind of ideologically and generally just understand what these ideologies are all about. Okay, so let's start off with socialism. Okay, socialism is a social, political, economic ideology. Okay, that believes that the major parts of an economy, okay, the major means of production, should be owned by the public, or the people and the government, rather than like a private business or an entrepreneur, okay, or a set of people. It should be public rather than private. Okay, and I'm going to kind of give you an example that'll help you understand what that means. This is in opposition to capitalism, okay, which is kind of been the new idea that's been really prevalent within the Industrial Revolution, where capitalism believes that the major means of production should be owned by private citizens, okay, and that government should only interfere in the economy where it benefits private business, okay? So you have one ideology, which is socialism, where the government has a major role within the economy. It owns, it runs, it facilitates major means of production, okay? Versus capitalism, where the government doesn't have a big role within the economy, okay? Where it's private business, private individuals who really facilitate and run the economy. Okay, so let me give you an example. Okay, let's talk about a really big industry in the United States, for example, is oil, right? We have tons of companies that compete against one another and that are owned by private individuals, owned by a select group of people that compete against one another, right? So we have companies like Chevron, if you were just driving down the road, Shell, USA Gasoline, Texaco, Arco, right? Tons of different companies, okay? And that's capitalism. You have these different companies, owned, operated by private individuals that are competing against one another. Socialism is a little bit different. If we had socialized gasoline in the United States, that would be like having the United States run it, and there would be really just kind of one company, right? And it'd just be like, on the corner of the streets, you just see kind of like United States government gasoline. You wouldn't see Chevron, Shell, right? It'd just be kind of that one entity, right? Another example of socialism that I can kind of give you that will help you is our public school system, right? It is taxpayer funded and run by the government, right? If you were to have a capitalistic school system, you might have like different and we have a little bit of that within the United States with like private schools, but you might have different company schools of where you could learn this or this, and you have to pay, and it might have a different quality of education. So socialism is where you have these major parts of the economy that are run by the government. Another example is with schooling. Before I go on to that example, schooling, right, is taxpayer funded, right? What pays my salary, what pays for the classroom, the lights, and everything. That's taxpayer funded. All right. Another example of kind of a social entity within the United States recently is right, the Affordable Care Act, right? Obamacare, where the government is kind of stepping in and kind of interfering within the free market of healthcare, and it's kind of where the government is kind of interfering within that to drive prices down and to make it more affordable and accessible to, in theory, to to the public. So socialism versus capitalism. And we're going to be talking more. If you're confused about these ideologies, leave a remark in the comments below, and I can kind of give more examples. But this is just where it's socialism. You think about it, more government intervention, capitalism, less government intervention. Okay, and that's that. And socialism is a reaction to capitalism. Okay, and we're going to talk about different types and some of the causes. Okay, so a main cause to the development of socialism, ladies and gentlemen, is it's a desire to reorganize society to establish more cooperation and a sense of community. All right, the working class, the misery of the working class, the working conditions, the just what was going on early within the Industrial Revolution really disturbed a lot of thinkers, liberal thinkers, and they are going to start proposing, modifications to laissez-faire economics. And this is where we're going to start to see a transition of liberalism to conservatism. We're going to see capitalism become more of a conservative ideology, and liberal thinkers are thinking about new ideas when it comes up to economics, and that's going to be socialism and communism are going to become more of the liberal ideologies, the new ideas when it comes to economics. So we're seeing kind of a change. All right, but many socialist thinkers believe that capitalism seemed to promote selfishness and really divided society. They believe that the free market was not adequately producing and distributing goods, that the way that some classical economists claimed, like Adam Smith. Within capitalism, the liberals, the socialists, they saw mismanagement, low wages, misdistribution of goods, but most importantly, the suffering of the working factory classes, those work hours, those the conditions, the child labor. They saw the working class not doing well, not having everything they need, and so we're going to see some opposition to capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about some of the early socialists. Okay, so what the early socialists proposed was a system of greater economic equality with the government, planned by the government. Okay, and we're going to see lots of different types of socialists that you don't really need to remember. What you need to understand is socialism in context of the Industrial Revolution, and how this is a response to capitalism and the Industrial Revolution and the different ideas. But we're going to see utopian socialists, and these were early socialists who were visionaries and sought to replace capitalistic structures with these ideal communities. And we'll talk about Robert Owen. And they're kind of they didn't just have new ideas when it came to economics and politics and society. They also had new ideas concerning sexuality, family. They believed in open family relationships, free love. So they had some different ideals outside of just economics. Okay, and one of the early socialists and socialist ideas we're going to see is Saint Simeonism, and this was by Count Claude and Henri de Saint Simeon, who believed that private wealth, that property, and that enterprise should be subject to an administration other than that of its owners. And like what he was trying to say was that his ideal government would look like you have this board of directors that would organize and coordinate, as opposed to just like the owners, right? Having more people have more of a say over property, over a business. Okay, kind of like a modern day board of directors. Okay, who might help distribute, who might help facilitate more cooperation, and who might have better management. And so, in with Saint Simeonism, you don't need to memorize all the specifics of this, ladies and gentlemen. He didn't want to really necessarily redistribute the wealth, like take money from the very rich and help and necessarily give it to the lower classes. He wanted to have the wealth managed more efficiently, managed by experts. Okay, the businesses managed by experts as opposed to just the owners. Okay, so some other intervention, not just having we have a CEO, for example, like Tim Cook of Apple or Elon Musk of like Tesla, right? It's having like a board of directors, a group of people who as opposed to just having Elon Musk in charge of Tesla, is having just having this group that to kind of watch the company and help make decisions that might be beneficial to the company but also to the workers. Okay, Robert Owen. All right, he's another early socialist, ladies and gentlemen, and he saw no incompatibility between a humane industrial environment and good profit. Okay, and so he believed that you can have good working conditions, good pay for the workers, and make a profit for the business, and that really. That was something that the socialists were really trying to deal with. Is obviously the primary objective for a business owner, right, is to maximize profit for their business and for themselves. And so, well, what's one way that you do that? Well, you may be as efficient as possible, and you try to save costs as much as possible. And what Robert Owen said, and let me go back really quickly to my previous thought, is some of the early capitalist business owners, well, one thing that really hurt them in their profitability was having to pay workers really well, or have them have good conditions, and paying for housing, or giving them time off, paid leave, or anything like that. And so Robert Owen said, no. Said you can do both. You can get a good profit for your company and take care of your workers. Whereas previous capitalistic business thinkers and business owners didn't necessarily believe that, okay, or try to follow that. And so Robert Owen, with his new Lanark cotton factory in Great Britain, was actually very successful in creating this socialist utopian community. He had this community where people worked in the factory, or farm workers lived together. They shared their resources. The workers had good quarters. Children had education, and the company made a profit. He was able to create this business model of giving benefits to workers, helping workers, housing, adequate pay, at the same time being able to make a profit. Now, he tried the same thing in Indiana, in the United States, and it's going to fail due to some fighting amongst the workers, but Robert Owen did see success with that. Another early socialist is Charles Fourier, who advocated the construction of phalanxes, this agrarian communities where people did like different tasks every day instead of the same task over and over again. He also had new ideas concerning sexuality and marriage. Another is Louis Blanc, who we'll talk about later on. He published this Organization of Labor, and he demanded an end to competition. He thought competition was harmful to the economy. He called for political reform to give the working class the right to vote so they could dictate legislation on their behalf. And he believed that, he believed the power of the state that could really help improve life and the conditions of labor. And Louis Blanc, was saying that the government needs to intervene to help workers, help laborers, and they need to have the right to vote. So some early socialist ideas, okay? And again, ladies and gentlemen, you don't need to memorize all these people. The most famous form of socialism we're going to get to and talk about is communism. Okay, all right. And here is a picture from the new Lanark community. All right. Now, another group that we're going to be seeing, ladies and gentlemen, rise during this time with some, really in opposition to capitalism are anarchists, and they're going to reject industry and government, and they believed that the government and social institutions were oppressive, were necessary, and the society should be based on cooperation, voluntary cooperation between individuals. And we're going to see, some very peaceful anarchists, but others that are going to be very violent, and kind of call for forms of terror. Auguste Blanqui, he called for a violent overthrow of capitalism, and his kind of call for revolution is going to foreshadow Lenin and the eventual communist revolution that we will see in the Soviet Union. We had Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who peacefully advocated for mutualism, a system of small businesses that would cooperate and exchange goods based on the mutual recognition of labor. So the big idea here, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm trying to get at is we're seeing new ideas in response to capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. But the biggest idea, ladies and gentlemen, and the one that's going to become popularized and most famous, that's really going to have the biggest impact on Europe, ladies and gentlemen, will be Marxism, aka communism. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, this is also called, there's many different names for communism. Marxism is another synonym, scientific socialism. So on the AP exam, if you see, scientific socialism. If you see Marxism, that's talking about communism. Okay, that is talking about communism. All right. So this is a radical form of socialism. Okay, so this is really important for us to understand, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, communism is a form of socialism. So, not all socialists are communists. Okay, all right, and that's really important to understand. Not all socialists are communists. Okay, but all communists, okay, are ideologically socialists. All right, if that makes sense. All right. Marxism is a form, communism is a form of socialism. They're not one and the same. There's many different types of socialism. Communism happens to be one, and it happens to be, is going to become one of the most influential and popular forms of socialism. Okay, and this form of socialism is going to, obviously, as I've already alluded to, have more influence over modern Europe than any other form of socialism. Okay, and it's going to be very important for us to understand. All right, and Lenin's form of Marxism, communism, is going to define the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe during the Cold War, and we're going to see communism spread. We're going to see China become a communist, other countries, Vietnam, parts of Korea, Cuba, right? We will see socialism and communism spread throughout the world. Okay, now one of the main figures of communism, Marxism, is Karl Marx. Ladies and gentlemen, he's German. All right, he's going to be exiled from Prussia and live in poverty periodically throughout his life, and that's really going to influence some of his ideas. He's going to meet Friedrich Engels, who we kind of alluded to before, ladies and gentlemen, who responds very forcefully to the Industrial Revolution. And together they're going to publish the Communist Manifesto in 1848. We need to know that book. We need to know that date. Very important. Okay, Communist Manifesto of 1848. This is the Bible of communism. Important for us, ladies and gentlemen, to understand and know. All right, and he adopted the name communist as he thought this name was a little bit more radical than socialism, and that as communism was a more radical form of socialism. Okay, and like I said before, this text is going to become the Bible of communism and one of the most influential political texts of the modern world, ladies and gentlemen. So very important for us to memorize that book and know it in conjunction to its kind of the opposite ideology, right? Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. All right, now we have kind of the opposite of that. Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels. All right, the books for these two different ideologies that are going to be in such contrast. Let's talk about what Marxism is and what it means. Okay, so a couple things that are really important for us to understand. Okay, communist Marxists, okay, believed in the complete abolition of private property, as opposed to socialists who believe, right, that the major means of production should be controlled by the government. But some socialists, okay, believe that there should be private property, private enterprise, only that some of the major parts of the economy should be governed by the government. Okay, so this is important to understand. All right, so some socialism, okay, just kind of generally believes that the major means of production should be governed by or controlled by the government. All right, communists believe that the private property, that the government should own pretty much everything. There's a complete abolition of private property. Get all of it's gone. Okay, the government takes control of everything. All right, that's a very radical notion. Okay, but that differs from kind of what the more moderate socialists believe. Okay, like I said before, they believe that the public, the people of government, should control all means of production, and they called for a total worldwide proletariat revolution and the violent overthrow of capitalism and bourgeoisie. So Marxists believed in violent revolution. Okay, violent revolution. And we're going to see kind of at the last sentence. I read the Communist Manifesto for a class in college. And the last line of that book is "Workers of the world unite." Okay, and Karl Marx calls for a total worldwide proletariat revolution and a violent overthrow. So Marxism, communists believed in violent revolution. Not all socialists do. Karl Marx, communists, did. Okay, they believed that this revolution was inevitable, and they also believed that this revolution would facilitate create a classless society where there is no class, there is no upper class, middle class, aristocracy, peasantry, right? It would be a classless society. Okay, let's talk about some of the sources of Marxism where Marx got his ideals. One is Hegel. All right. Another is French utopian socialism, and the next is British classical economics, which is capitalism. Okay. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go through this. It's not too important. I just wanted to kind of talk about where Marx got some of his ideological and intellectual influences from. Hegel was influential. He influenced Marx through his ideas of the thesis and antithesis. Okay, and Marx believed that the conflict between the wealthy and lower classes, was going to lead to the development of this new labor proletariat class, and therefore create a new social conflict and discontent. So he believed, what Karl Marx believed is, if you remember that thesis and antithesis, that you would have, right, the thesis was capitalism, the antithesis was going to be socialism, and out of that battle of ideologies was going to become the new synthesis, which would become communism. Okay, you'd have this new ideology kind of arise from these two differing notions. French utopian socialism was also very influential to him. It had depicted the problems of capitalism and property inequity and distribution. It believed the fate of the proletariats equated to the fate of all humanity. And we're going to see Marxism, ladies and gentlemen, believe that the proletariats will, take power. Okay, take power, and we will eventually see those notions tested within the Soviet Union. And British classical economics, capitalism, very much this is, the Enlightenment capitalism. This encouraged him to be analytical, economic, and scientific. And so there's a reason why Marxism is called scientific socialism. He takes part of the Enlightenment. He takes that scientific approach to economics, supply and demand, that we see in capitalism, very objective, reason, right? And he's gonna apply that to communism. He's going to apply that analytical thought process, that scientific approach, that reason, that rational approach to that we saw within the Enlightenment to his ideas and ideologies within communism, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so let's talk about class conflict. Okay, this is a major part and portion of communist ideology. And Engels and Marx are going to assert that within the Communist Manifesto that capitalism would eventually, produce a violent revolution by the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. Okay, they believe that this would be caused by the ever increasing suffering of the proletariats at the hands of capitalists, at the hands of the bourgeoisie, and that eventually, this revolution would take place. And they believe that this revolution was inevitable, like I mentioned, and they believe that the revolution would initially produce a dictator, but would eventually, produce a classless and propertyless society. Now, this is a fundamental flaw within Engels and Marx ideas, and that so they believe that this revolution would produce a dictator, but they assumed that dictator would then eventually relinquish power to the classless society. Well, as we're going to find out within the Soviet Union, that's not going to be necessarily what happens. And once that dictatorship is established, that dictatorship will be there for quite a while. So they kind of assume, which was quite interesting, that the dictator would just relinquish power, and that's not going to be the case. What we see, especially within the Soviet Union. So that's definitely a fundamental flaw within a notion that they were talking about within the Communist Manifesto. And there's a picture of Karl Marx. All right. So we'll stop there, ladies and gentlemen, for today. Hopefully that was helpful. If you found any of that confusing or anything, we can kind of go through that in the comments below. I can make another lecture, a video about that. But just, when it comes to socialism and communism, big ideas, especially for the AP exam, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? Thank you so much. In the next lecture, we will talk about the revolutions of 1848. Take care.